Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Reverend Stephen, and I'm here with Matthew Reese. We're going to be doing our this week's Holy Grounds conversations. Matthew will be our preacher on Saturday and Sunday, and we're going to be talking about the gospel passage, which Matthew has very kindly agreed to read for us right now.
Great. The gospel comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verses 2 through 9. Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, only Jesus. As they were coming down from the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead.
Great. Thank you, Matthew.
Of course.
My first, maybe quick question for you is, you chose the gospel to preach on, and I'm just wondering what drew you to preach on the gospel this week.
Well, yeah, I think actually this is a nice example in the lectionary where all of the lessons in the psalm are interrelated. So, so really you can kind of preach on any of them, and you're preaching on all of them, because the Old Testament lesson is the story of Elijah and Elisha going up to the mountain, and Elijah being taken up by the heavenly host up to heaven. So defying death. Elijah does not die. He's just assumed up into heaven. And so the whole idea that this is the fulfillment of that prophecy, right? That when Elijah returns, we will also see the return of the Messiah. So I think what's so great about the gospel is it's such a remarkable and complicated moment, the moment of the Transfiguration. So this is not actually when we celebrate the Feast of the Transfiguration. We'll celebrate that on August 6th. But this is the moment where we talk at the start of Lent about how Jesus's transfiguration on the mountain does a couple of things. One, it proves to the disciples that Jesus is the Son of God. It's the last inalienable proof, right? That we have the voice of God and we see Jesus changed. And two, it associates Jesus with all of the patriarchs and the prophets who have come before.
Absolutely.
So we have the sense of lineage. So number one, Jesus is the Son of God. Number two, Jesus is the fulfillment of the prophecies. And we know it because we have Elijah and Moses on either side of him speaking with him. And then three, and this is, I think, an old patristic notion. So one of the sort of theologies of the early church fathers is the idea that it prefigures Jesus's resurrection and ascension.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the other important thing. This is the foreshadowing before Ash Wednesday of everything that's to come through Lent and Holy Week and the Triduum. It's the idea that Jesus is saying, tell no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead, which is baffling to the disciples because they don't know what this is about. And it's the first clue of what's to happen. So it's a really important lesson because it ties together Jesus's identity, Jesus's ministry, and Jesus's future.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think another example of how we cannot understand the mission and the vocation of Jesus without the broader Old Testament stories and mission as well. So I think that beautiful connection. So I'm going to ask you, we have these 3 questions. These actually are quite personal questions that I think this will be a good example and a good model for how we each can hear and kind of inwardly digest, as we say. the gospel, and to how is it meaningful to us personally, and how is it impactful? So this is a very general question, so you take it in any way you want, but I'd be curious just what comes off the top of your head. But the first question is, how does Christ make himself known to you personally, Matthew?
Oh. I think I find Christ in relationship. So in understanding, in good works, in closeness with other people. So I think for me, what's so important about the message of Jesus and Jesus's ministry is that Jesus is, I always come back to this idea of Emmanuel, right? God among us, and that the humanness of Jesus, of that person of the Trinity is to me so important. And so I find Christ in the relationship with others. And I actually think this is a good lesson for that, because this is a relational gospel, right? This is about Jesus's presentation to those whom he loves, right, to his disciples, and Jesus's relationship to those in the past. And so I think that's also a place where I find one thing that I find important about the practice of faith, is that it gives me some comfort in knowing that I'm carrying on the tradition of my forebears, right, of people whom I do not know. So I've always found that the gospel and that the church are a form of my relationship with people before me who I didn't have the privilege of meeting. So that kind of continuity, and I think in a sense that's also sort of what the lesson on the Transfiguration is about too, right? I mean, Jesus did not know he could not have known Elijah and Moses, and yet God did, right? So it's this this complex part of the two of the three parts of the Trinity here.
It's a beautiful, I think one of the things that also that you're making, I think, an implicit connection is when we talk about the Eucharist as that moment where the past, the present, and the future meet in one.
Yeah.
And so this is a very kind of Eucharistic moment that Jesus is having, bringing all
absolutely.
those together. To kind of continue on with the second question, that's just kind of a continuation of this, is for you, what emotions do you feel when you have a sense of the presence of Christ?
A mixture of calm and also of fear. I mean, I think I remember moments that really jolted me out of my complacency. I mean, one place that I always come back to is an Easter vigil that I sang in 2014 as being a sort of, for lack of a better term, a come to Jesus moment, where it really was that sort of romantic experience of the sublime, where we haven't had any alleluias for 40 days of Lent, and then alleluia, alleluia, Christ is risen, and all the bells ring and the lights come up and the organ blares, and I think it really is that kind of sublime experience of at once being in awe of the beauty of it and also kind of frightened of the enormity of it. So I think that's one sense, but I think also I think that's God in the earthquake, wind, and fire, right? And then to borrow from the hymn, then there's also that still small voice of calm. And so I think I find God at those two extremes. On the one hand, in like a deep personal sense of quietude and release, and also in these spectacular moments, which for me mostly are kind of inspired either by natural beauty or by sort of the climax of worship and liturgy.
Beautiful. And I think something important that you're alluding to is the glory of God can be at both of those extremes.
Yeah,
that's what makes God God.
I think that's the whole. Yeah, because God is everywhere, right? So the inescapability of the divine means that, I mean, you can find God, I think, in the most prosaic moments, but I think a lot of us are as we sort of go about the sort of ordinariness of our days, I think sometimes it's hard to remember that God is there too. And so the experience of the special or the majestic or the awesome, right, in the old understanding of those words, are moments that remind us of the presence of God. But I think the challenge is to remember that that God is there with you when you're making your cup of tea in the morning, and God is with you when you're seeing families and loved ones, or longing to see them, as the case may be now.
Yeah, well, which dovetails beautifully, I think, to the third question, which is maybe the most difficult. Is there something you are afraid of that is keeping you from listening to Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, I think I am probably alike with a lot of Christians in knowing in the back of my mind just how revolutionary and extraordinary the message of the gospel is, and how much it asks of us, and that living into the fullness of that is a scary thing, right?
Do you have an example more specifically?
Well, I mean, I know we were talking about this in one of our small groups, but right, if we were all really following the gospel, I say this as a in inverted commas, knowing that this is a slightly polemical statement, but we'd sell everything we had, and we'd go off and we'd serve the poor. And I know there's a lot of biblical exege's and theology about that passage. Well, Jesus only told one guy to do that, and maybe he means it metaphorically, but there's lots of moments in the gospel like that which say to us, more is required of you. There is more that you can give. There is more that you owe to your fellow human beings. And whether or not you decide that you want to sell all your worldly possessions, certainly many godly people across the ages have not done that and found other ways to serve. I think it's scary to realize how much more there is that we can all still do, and how much is asked of us. And I think really reveling in the challenge and the discomfort of that is important, because when we dig into it, we can find that there are so many ways that we can contribute to other people, and that we can live out the gospel and help to the greater good. And even if you feel that you can never do all of it, because of course none of us can do all of it, because we are human, right? That's the very nature of being members of the body of Christ, is that.
Yeah. And maybe the other thing that I think you're hinting at too is the idea of, if Jesus's call is always a call of invitation and encounter, then in what ways are we using our material well-being and our material things to avoid encountering Jesus in others' needs?
Yeah, and I think that's really, really true. I mean, I think a thing that's, we've talked about this a lot, a thing that's near and dear to my heart, which I wish I were doing more in, and I wish the church were doing more in, is homelessness ministry. And I think that's a really important way where we can encounter other people where they are and as they are. And I don't think any of us can ever do enough in that regard, right? That's one place where all of us can spend more time. And I think it is easy to say, well, I'll get to that next week, right? Or maybe I can help the church form a commission to do X, Y, or Z, or maybe I'll give some money to Episcopal Relief and Development, and we should do all of those things. But to be sort of constantly reminded that people in need, both of physical and material well-being and comfort, and in need of the gospel, aren't just there when we see them on our drive to church on Sunday, right? They're there every day. And we, all of us, can be better about ministering to their needs and looking out for them.
Yeah, and maybe even be surprised the ways that they might minister to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the whole point, is, right? I mean, it would be facile to say that it's a one-way relationship, right? Because through helping others in some material ways, we are ourselves helped in spiritual ways, and also in more practical ways, in understanding, the world in which we live.
Yeah,
that's not
beautiful.
a terribly cohesive thought, but I hope that makes
No,
sense.
no, it very much is, and I think it's very much about how our current reality is transfigured so that Christ is present in more places than we can imagine.
Yeah.
So, well, excellent. Thank you, Matthew. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing your preaching this weekend.
Great.
And you'll be preaching at both the 5 o'clock evening prayer service that'll be on Facebook Live, and then on our YouTube channel for the 10:15, which will also be from Resurrection Chapel, but will be on our YouTube channel. So we'll look forward to both of those things.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day.
See you soon.
Okay,
Ciao.
bye.